I'm doing good. I last night I did stay up a little bit. My oldest daughter, 8 years old, her name's Anne Marie. Love her. Wow. Just growing up, I feel like my life is trying to learn how to become a kid while training adults how to become adults. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There's like two competing things here. I want to get on the floor and just get out of the logical mind and just become immersed in adventure. But anyways, we put together a family crest. So my name McDonald. This is our family crest, and we actually put something together that was really cool, and we had fun doing it. So I was excited about that. But yeah, James, do you have kids? I don't know if I know that. So
Yeah, I have a 10-year-old and a almost 14-year-old. And so your 8-year-old, I love that age group starting at 8. Like that's where I started having the most amount of fun as a parent, just because I could start to relate to them better and enjoy doing things with them as opposed to for them. It just changed the dynamic a lot for me.
yeah, for sure. Well, I want my the listeners, the marketplace of LinkedIn to know who you are. So I wanted to introduce you. Yeah, Jamie, we I'm excited to introduce you that you're the Vice President of Product Development at NUView. Currently, you're an accomplished innovator in technical product management. And from the looks of it, you really have a strong track record of developing groundbreaking solutions that derive success in both commercial and government sectors, both of which are things I think the marketplace is focused on as well. But today, I just for everybody to know, we'll explore his insights on self-directed learning, just a look back to last week. And then we're going to dive into what we've looked at as the 80-20 rule in learning, how to cultivate a culture of continuous innovation within teams. But Jamie, I want to allow you to say anything that I haven't said, and I just want to give you a chance to fill in the blanks.
Yeah, no, I think this is an interesting topic, and I think one of the keys to addressing all of these things is to be curious and to look into things and learn and find something you're willing to be curious about and let that be your passion and your driver. Because if you're curious, you're gonna learn more.
Wow, that is so true, so true. And I'm gonna parking lot my own thoughts that are going, and I'm going to stay on topic. But hey, real quick, just to look back to last week, I'm curious, do you have any thoughts on self-directed learning and how that's shown up in your role and roles experience?
Yeah. So I went to school and got out of college, and I landed a job at a company called the Aerospace Corporation, and they were essentially a knowledge bank and expertise bank for the government. They worked with military customers, and so they were rotating through their positions, and they relied on aerospace to be their store of expertise. And coming right out of college, I was not exactly a store of expertise, and so it was kind of a funny role. I got exposure to a lot of great things, but it was also sort of challenging for me because people looked to me to have this expertise that I didn't have yet. And it wasn't like a place where I would go build it necessarily the way I thought I would. But then I left aerospace and went back to work at UVA where I had graduated. And I worked for a professor there. And all of a sudden, I was all on my own. He had research programs and he says, "Yep, this is what I want you to be working on." And I had to figure it out. I had to remember how to write software and how to figure things out and solve problems. And one of the best things that I did for myself and for others, perhaps, was leading these capstone teams of fourth year students working on real projects. And in addition to sort of, motivate them, move forward, and keeping them in bounds, I sort of made a U around them. uh, I really spent a lot of time teaching them to learn. They
Mm.
would come to me, and graduate students too. They would come to me and say, "What's the answer?" And I'd say, "I don't know, but here's how we can find it out." And so teaching people how to use search engines and how to look for things and discover how to solve their own problems really became what I realized was my big value to these students. And in doing so, I realized that was my own value to myself. And so it was a really mutually enhancing experience where I learned to learn and learned to teach to learn. And that was a lot of fun.
I'm getting so excited. I mean, I think there's a reason why you're good friends with Saul, the speaker from last week, but that touches so many different areas. I've got to share this because I think it's so important. It's something I want for my kids, right? It's something I want for me. It's something I want for my coworkers, anybody that I come in contact with. It's funny though. I think about it in this way. I was always, I would always laugh. The first book I ever read in college was How to Read a Book. How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. And at least he had a strong name. I was like, wow, what's this about? It's got to be. I mean, he's got a serious name, right? But what I learned from that is there was actually so much I didn't know about reading a book. And you know what? There's so much didn't know, didn't have the framework for as a kid on how to learn. And I think there's worthy more work to be done for sure. But man, what I know now about the learning process, way different, right? And
Mhm.
wanting to really embrace the journey versus just the final outcome. That starts with preparation, right? So lots of what we'll be talking about and continuing to talk about in this series. Well, hey, let's jump into this week's focus. And the first question we're going to start with, James, is how can focusing on the 20% of knowledge that yields 80% of the results enhance overall learning efficiency within product teams? And feel free to change the question if you think the question doesn't start well enough as well. But
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think I've worked in a lot of different roles, and I think the same process applies whether it's product management or anything else, frankly. I think that there's some jobs are very focused where you have a very, very deep skill set in a very narrow area. For example, software. You may be a really strong back-end developer and you may specialize in two or three languages that you use most of your time. That's a very deep, specific knowledge. Whereas product management requires knowledge of a lot of different subjects, marketing, sales, product development, software engineering, business, all of that, all of those different topics. But regardless of what it is, that my feeling is that the 20% that you need to get the 80% of value is not probably the total amount you need to learn, but it's the amount you need to get going. And so for me, when I think about learning and trying to solve new kinds of problems, I sort of think you need essentially three things. You need to know the motivation. Why is it that you're doing this effort? You need to have some understanding of the basics. What is it that basic information about what you're trying to do and the context in which it fits in, and the structure. And so if you have you understand the motivation, the basics, and the structure, that's enough to get going. And really, at the end of the day, you're going to learn by doing more things. And so, um, to break that down a little bit further, the motivation helps you understand what the goal is. So, an example I've thought up for this discussion was a bit about a project I got assigned recently. My boss said, "Hey, Jamie, I need you to do a competitive analysis." And let's say I've never done one of those before and I didn't know. But the context in which he asked me that was when we were looking at trying to understand what our unique value propositions were and how we compared and how we could compete against companies who were bidding on similar work for us. So knowing that that was what the context was, I really understood that he really needed to understand how we could differentiate ourselves with our customers. So that was the question that he needed answered. And so that's the motivation. Um, and then the basics are, well, okay, what is a competitive analysis? Well, I know that it means looking at our competitors, looking at their products, looking at their pricing and their positioning and their market segments and trying to understand that. But, that's sort of a pretty high level understanding of what a typical competitive analysis would be. And then the structure. And the structure is, what does this product look like? What is the project outcome going to look like? And this is where ChatGPT can be like so valuable. So, let's say I'd never done this before and I was confronted with this situation. The first things I might say is ChatGPT, how do I conduct a competitive analysis? I build a geospatial analytics platform. It's a SaaS software offering, and I need to compare what I have to my competitors so that we can differentiate ourselves. ChatGPT will give you a really good answer about what are the basics of, competitive analysis and what are the things that you need to be looking for, and give you a lot of good ideas. And, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying it's the only source of answers, but it'll give you a really great starting point. And there you can start Googling and figuring out and solving the rest of the problem. So the 20% is enough to get you to the point where you can then easily transition and go learn how to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And then you can start decomposing this. The other thing is the structure. If you're thinking about the structure, well, okay, ChatGPT, can you provide an outline of a competitive analysis for a SaaS platform? And that outline then gives you the structure of what you're trying to do. And so take the structure and then the information you got from the basics question about what it is and how to do it. And now you have enough information to dig in and do each section and learn a little bit more as you do it. So the 20% that you need to know probably isn't enough to solve the whole problem, but it's enough to get you started, and you learn by doing. And the more you do it, the better you get. And the other point I'd make is that you learn a lot by making mistakes. So make sure that when you deliver this, you deliver it as a draft and say, hey, boss, I just wrote this. This is, the first draft of it. I wanted to validate this with you and make sure that I'm on the right target and answering the questions that you wanted answered. And let me know what you think. I'd love to get your feedback on this. Or if it's not the boss, hey, colleague, this is what I'm trying to do. Same thing. So, allowing yourself to make room to make mistakes and to get better. Adam Grant recently wrote in his book, Hidden Potential, that people actually learn more from these mistakes. And he uses the example of people learning new languages. And the way that they learned the best was that they would go and put themselves in situations where they couldn't, didn't speak the language well, and force themselves to do things that they don't know how to do and to make mistakes. And then they would, those mistakes help them learn faster. Now, needless to say, you don't just buy a ticket, go to China, and hope for the best. You need to know the basics. You need to know how to say a few things and have some basic dialogue, or else this really isn't going to get you very far. But that 20% is enough to get you started.
I love it. I love it. So I think for me, the next question before I forget, I think what are the critical things, right, to get to that point? What are the critical things to know what is that 20% that, or whatever that is, that Kickstarter information? I mean, how do we interact with Chat GPT? Because in what I just said, or what I just heard you say, we become the designers and directors, and we are prompting, in this case, Chat GPT to produce something for us. Is it just as simple as like typing in, hey, can you help me do this? Like, for somebody who hasn't used Chat GPT, what are some thoughts that you would give them? What are the critical things of how they approach it and engaging with it?
Ask a lot of questions, right? And then be, thoughtful about reading it. Don't just take the answer and say, "Nope, I'm done." Walk away. It's think about that, challenge that. Say, is that really right? Is that all? So one of the things about ChatGPT, it does a great job and it'll get you information really quickly. But a recent experience, I was trying to find all of the open pit mines for a particular company globally. And I said, hey, where are all the open pit mines owned by this company? And they gave me a list of 5 or 10. I said, are there any more? And it gave me 5 more. I was like, well, that's interesting. Are there any more? And I kept asking until I didn't get any more. Right. So, it's not, I don't want to say that ChatGPT is a panacea, and it's not the only place you can go.
Yeah.
Product management, there are tons and tons of books on it, but there isn't a lot of whole coursework, and there's a lot of like philosophical stuff about it, but there isn't like, hey, here's a competitive analysis framework and here's how you do it. And here are things like that. These are a lot of things that people learn on the job. And the same goes for software frameworks. If you want to think about software, there aren't tons and tons of books about, here's how to do this or how to do that. There are some philosophical books that talk about structures and frameworks, but sometimes there aren't as many books on sort of the nuts and bolts of things. And so I find looking at examples and finding other examples. If you're not comfortable using ChatGPT or you don't like it, Google it, right? So Google, find me an example of a competitive analysis done for a SaaS platform. And look for examples and other things that would get you started. And then if you don't know how to do it, then you can Google, how do I do this? Like literally use these tools and say, how do I do this? And follow the thread, keep going. Oh, this is interesting. Now tell me more about this. Um,
Yeah.
that's how I approach it.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Well, I think that's great. ChatGPT is definitely a great Kickstarter tool. I've found that for me in my daily work. And it's never the end all be all. You're not just blindly
Yep,
sending whatever it shares. If you are, well, you're not a good journalist. You're not a good, legal person. Don't show up to court if you don't know how to say something. If you're in class and you say a word better, know what it means, right? Those type things. But just like that, I mean, whatever it takes. What is that Kickstarter though? What's that, initial boost? ChatGPT can be that for you. Maybe it's some type of training in some sort of way. Maybe it's getting a coach. I talked about in the last
sure.
session on diet. I had some goals at the beginning of the year. I got a coach. And you know what? He helped me with the rhythms that would help me kickstart into this. And it was just doing some of those rhythms, doing it imperfectly, getting it wrong over and over. And I think I heard all those things in what you just shared. So fantastic stuff, James. I think that's definitely something I'm going to go back and look at. I know you mentioned a book by Adam Grant or a thought concept that came from him. So I'm going to go back and read that. So
That's a fantastic book. I recommend it to everybody. Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. I read that when I was, going through some stuff in my own life, and it really inspired me. It inspired me to be a better parent, and it inspired me to be a better colleague. It's a fantastic book.
it's cool. Well, the next question that we have, what strategies, James, do you recommend for identifying, this critical 20%, we're calling it for the sake of this conversation, of information or skills that will have the most impact, let's say, on product innovation and development, something that's really meaningful to you?
Yeah, there's a few tactics that I use here. One is I love looking at other examples and inspiration from others. So, typically you're not truly in an absolute blue ocean. So go look at what some of the competitors or similar products, even if they're not in your niche or anything, look and see what others do. And get inspired. See what they do really well and see what they do really badly and try to like think about that and then think about your customers and what's the motivation again. Always it's got to come back to a motivation, and especially in product it's always about the vision that you're trying to build. What is it that you're trying to build? What problems are you trying to solve? Why do you do all of this work, and why are we creating a product, and why should someone buy it? That's really what comes down to his product, is figuring out, answering that why, understanding that, and then building everything from that. So I do think that harkening back to the why of what you're trying to do is essential in any of this learning. And
Can
that's
I
that's a good point to start from.
Can I interrupt you there? Because this is the second time you said motivation. So another thing I learned in college. So thankful to the professor, Dr. Ashford, who told me. And a tip to anybody out there, it still applies in business. Okay, so if you have a question or you have a thought, well, think about it. Let somebody finish what they're saying. If it still applies, maybe ask it, right?
Yeah.
If it still applies, then I'm going to bring it up. If not, and you covered the topic, I don't need to one up you. But motivation, this, you've said it twice now, and it's a really big concept. It's something I'm going through. So you're coming at it from a product standpoint. You're coming at it from all of your experience. Me having been in a role that's primarily in sales for the last decade and account management, I have to grapple with this all the time. There are things that I'm being asked to do from any level of leadership, and well, I have to balance the reality that I know the type of salesperson I am is to bring value to my customer, and I believe at the end of the day that's going to be the best thing. But let's try this on for size for a second. Now, the next set of questions are rhetorical, James, but listen at this. Follow. Give me 1 second. If my eye, right, is on the money, guess where my eyes are not, James? They're not on you. And if my eyes are not on you, then you don't get to see me. And if you don't see me and I don't see you, James, guess what doesn't happen? Trust is not built.
Yeah.
What are we doing then, right? But this happens more frequently than you would think, James, where we sit in boardrooms and we all think it's not worth anything, but yet we're wasting time. Time that we could be innovating and growing, time that we could have tangible conversations to collaborate. I fall into the category sometimes too. Wow, we get fatigued for sure, and we got to watch that. We've got to figure out what are the ways to recharge, ourselves. But what is that motivation? You've said it twice. It's really important. So I'm going to make it even more important to this conversation.
I don't
But
think you can make it important enough.
yeah.
So there's another part of the question I'd love to sort of share. And it's something I've tried to do so many times throughout my life and never succeeded or gotten value from until very recently. And sometimes you get asked to do things and you don't necessarily want to say, I don't know how to do that. That's okay. That's pretty normal. Especially like if my boss came to me and said, Jamie, I want you to do a competitive analysis. I'm not going to say, shoot, I don't know how to do that. That's not going to be the next thing coming out of my mouth. That's not career enhancing or even necessarily the smart thing to do. I might ask some contextual questions like, well, what is it you're trying to achieve here? Why are you looking for this? And what questions do you want to make sure that I answer? That's a good question. Again, motivation, why? But the habit that I've tried to start is to, at night, especially when I've been putting off a task or not doing it because I'm not sure how to get going, is to sit down in a journal and just write it. I'm having trouble getting started with this. Why am I having trouble? Well, I'm a little anxious because I don't really feel comfortable that I know how to do it. Why do I feel anxious about that? And just asking myself the 5 whys and writing it down and saying, well, what questions do I have? What do I know about this? And just literally interviewing myself as if I'm my own therapist and trying to figure out what the blocker is for me to get this task done or to start this project or to get going. And usually what I have found, I've done this like 3 or 4 times where I've been like, geez, yeah, that's really true. And it's been able to like, well, it sounds like kind of abstract, but I'll get to the point where I like, the reason I'm delaying on this task or the reason I'm having a hard time on this is because I don't know how to do this and I'm afraid of like digging into something I don't know how to do. So I need to just get over that. And if I just get over that and focus on it, I'll get started. And that's again another reason I sort of like ChatGPT because it gets you away from that white piece of paper. Some people really have a hard time dealing with the white sheet of paper, and that's not something I struggle with because my strategy has always been just go.
Yeah.
You can ask anybody who I work with; they say I move fast. I don't necessarily, I do move fast, but it's not just about moving fast. It's about getting momentum and gaining momentum. And that's what gets you going. And that's what's going to get you involved. When I really sit down and start these new tasks, I actually start having fun. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. I see how people are doing this. And then I see this, I see they didn't follow that rubric and it didn't really help, but these guys did, and it did help. And actually, I just by going and getting that momentum, my work becomes fun and I get over those anxieties. And so I think sometimes a journal is a way to interview yourself. And I'll actually harken back to the same book again as I was talking about this. I'm reminded Grant points out in the same book that a strategy you can have is when you're really struggling with someone, you don't even have someone to talk to. Imagine you were someone else, and what advice would you give that person? And he says 9 times out of 10, you can solve somebody else's problems easier than you can solve your own, and you have the right advice to give them. So just apply that to yourself. And that's sort of what I've started doing. And it's been tremendously powerful because you could just say, well, what would I do if, or what would I tell my friend who's telling me, yeah, I don't know really how to do this. I'm feeling kind of anxious. I would say, just go get an outline and try to answer the first question in the outline and get going.
2 things. You're getting me so excited. I mean, this is how we should start every Friday morning, right?
Sure.
Excited about what we get to do every day and what we continue to get to write our stories and personally, professionally, whatever. But the 2 things you said, your idea of move fast makes me think of a book I'm reading. So I'm reading Business Made Simple by Donald Miller. And I love because it catches my eye because it says simple. Okay, that's something I can do. All right, great. But I pick it up and I start reading just a little bit each morning. I love to read. I had to read a lot in college, but sometimes you just lose the muscle. But I'm trying to build it back up. But he has a way of saying that bias towards action.
Oh yeah.
And he talked about every successful person in his book has a bias towards action. Now, I've tried to implement that even this year, right? I think it's something I've been able to actually measure, but having that bias towards action, huge. The other thing he said that I really connect with, just my story and just to be a little vulnerable, I grew up in a lot of rigid ways of living, right, as a kid. And so coming into um rightly being able to engage myself and other people, learning how to engage my feelings. I'm even having to do as a dad, right? Like they're having all these big emotions. Well, what does that make for me? Well, I have even bigger emotions because they have emotions, right? But being able to engage that, so often we don't do it. We just push it away, whether through anger or it shows up at work or home in just not being kind, right, to someone else. Why? Because you're not being kind to yourself. You feel like something's wrong, but you're not willing to actually do the work to understand what it is. And so I love how you talk about having a conversation with procrastination, right? And that's just a beautiful thing, because what I've started to learn how to do is have a conversation with anger. Oh, anger, I see you showed up. Hey, pull up a chair, let's have a conversation. I'll make you some eggs. I'm having 4 eggs and a half avocado. What would you have? Thanks to Matt Hart, that's what I eat every morning. But anyways, enough on that. Last question, James. How does your at your current company or whatever you're working on, we'll kind of leave that general, but how do you prioritize this approach in training programs? So the things we are talking about, especially to ensure that team members are equipped to drive impactful product outcomes, how does that apply in your purview?
So it's interesting. I've been working for very small companies recently, both in my current role and in my previous role at a online learning company. And it's kind of interesting. When I was working at the online learning company, I spent a lot of time learning how to learn because we were trying to build features of that into software and to manifest that. Um, so I think people, one thing to do about learning is to keep it short and applied and revisit it regularly. And so, a well-known concept is the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which basically says that you quickly forget a lot of things, and it sort of looks like a exponentially decaying function where you quickly forget most things and then you retain things. But what you can do to counteract that is just before you forget it, if you're forced to remember it again, you'll actually form a much deeper neural pathway and remember something better. So think of the difference of repeating a phone number to yourself 10 times in a row versus repeating that phone number to yourself once a day for 10 days. You're going to remember it better if you do it once a day for 10 days because you're almost forgetting it and then you're recalling it and pulling it back out of the cobwebs and doing it. And that's what helps you learn. So I think having short and reflective learning experiences is really important and also applied. Sort of make it so we learn like one little thing and then apply it. Now, as I said, I've worked with really small companies lately where we haven't had lots of deep formal learning programs per se, but we're all in sort of research and innovation mode, and innovative companies are always in this. Innovation is discovering and thinking about new things. So you can't just go to the book and pull it off the shelf and learn how to do it. You can't just go to the web and figure out how to do it. You're creating something. And so I think even beyond a learning program, it's teaching people to be curious, teaching them how to figure out how to do things. Like I talked about, ChatGPT. Go back and learn how to use ChatGPT to figure out how to solve a new problem. Go to use Google to figure out how to use a new problem, solve a new problem. Go find an example of somebody else doing something and how can that inspire you to do what you need to do. Those are the kinds of things. And I think reading or I listen to books on tape while I'm walking the dog. I'm re-listening to Power of Habit again. It's fun and it's interesting, and it's got all sorts of fascinating examples about how you build habits. Um, I think that's really important. But I think when it comes to organizationally focusing on how do you encourage people to learn the way I like to have people learn and the way I like to learn myself, is first is the leadership needs to be open and honest that they don't have all the answers. You go to school for all these years and you get homework assignments and the teachers bring them home and grade them because they know the answers, right? Um, and then I remember I had a graduate student who came to me and he says, "Well, what do I need to do on this? How do I get this right?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know the answer." And he sort of looked at me puzzled. I'm like, "This is research. We don't know the answers. I know how to find them, but I don't know them. So let's go figure out this answer." Right? And so to be a boss who doesn't know the answer, that's okay, right? That's why you have a team that's working with you. And these are your colleagues. They're not working for you. You are all working for the company and trying to solve this problem together. So you don't need to have all the answers. So as a boss, you need to be understanding and accept the fact that you don't have all those answers, and accept that people who are under you in the org chart may know how to do things better than you, and be vulnerable about that. Say, yeah, I don't really know the best way to do this, but I need to have a market assessment so that I can understand these kinds of questions. Hey, John, can you work on that? And it's okay if you don't know how to do that. We'll figure it out together. But to make it okay for people not to know things, and
Mm,
earlier I mentioned how sometimes you don't always want to speak up when you don't know exactly how to do something. You want to foster an organization where it's completely okay for you to say, I really don't know how to do that. Do you have any recommendations, or how can I get started on this? Right? So I think it comes a lot from leadership of, creating a place where it's okay not to know, it's okay to be wrong. It's encouraged to bring early drafts and help people get to the answers that you're looking for, and be sure that you're clear about your motivations. Make sure, if they don't ask you for the motivation and you don't tell them, you're not going to get the right product at the end of the day. So make sure that your motivations for doing things are clear and explicit, and ask. One of the things I ask all the time is, does this make sense? My team probably is sick of hearing me say that, but I always want to stop and say, everything I've said makes complete sense to me. It's totally logical, rational, everything's perfect, but I want to make sure it makes sense to you, because that's what matters. I'm trying to share this with you so you understand my perspective. And so stopping and asking, are there any questions, is a really, really important tool for managers. And again, for people who aren't managing other people, like I said, get curious, get enough to get started, and just go. You don't know how to do it all? Doesn't matter. Go, do it. You're going to learn and you're going to figure it out, and you're going to get someplace and you're going to be like, geez, I'm stuck. I don't know how to solve this. Ask someone, ask your boss, ask Google, ask ChatGPT, ask a book. Go read a book on market analysis, or go read a book by someone who's done this or famous for that. You know, enjoy it. Take it as an opportunity to go figure something out and learn to do better. And also submit a draft to your boss and say, hey, does this really scratch the itch? Am I on the right track, or what am I missing here? What do you think this should be like? Um, but don't come to your meetings with blank sheets of paper. That's another thing that I'm really adamantly opposed to. Never come to a meeting with a blank sheet of paper, because you're coming with only questions and no suggestions, and is a lot easier to comment and advise to somebody who has something on the paper. You can say, oh yeah, this isn't really what I'm looking for, I need something more like this, than to say, well, geez, I need this market analysis, and this is what I think of market analysis. It just feels too big to even address in a meeting if you come with a blank sheet of paper. But if you come with something specific and it's wrong, no problem. I don't care. Great. I'm glad you showed me that. You're on the complete wrong track. Let's not waste any more of your time. This is what I want. Here's what I need. Da, 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 da. And I can give you feedback on that right away, really quickly, solve it in the meeting. And then the next meeting, you're going to be closer to where I want you to be. May not be right on. That's fine. We'll do it again. So keep this iterative environment where people, get feedback early on, give that feedback willingly. And, again, as a boss, I may be asking someone to do something that I don't know how to do myself. So if they come to me and say, how do I do this market analysis, Jamie? I'm like, no, I'm not really good at this myself. That's why I gave it to you. But, let's figure it out together. Or here's some books that might help you, or go take the time to go learn this. That can be a perfectly legitimate response. I don't really know how to do this really well myself. Why don't you find some resources, some coaching, some books, some trainer, and learn how to do it? And I'll support that as a boss.
yeah.
So
Wow.
that's kind of how I see it.
I hope everybody heard that. If not, there is cool features where you can rewind and go back now these days pretty easily. You don't have to sit and spin, none of that with cassette tapes. I don't even know if some of the people know what cassette tapes are
Yeah, I
anymore.
know.
Wow, this is just a weird state of life when you feel like you're becoming your dad. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the type of
I've,
feeling.
I've got the
Wow,
same gray in my beard now.
just a quick highlight. And there's a lot. Just prepare. But when you said the overwhelming thing that pops in my head when you started talking about curiosity and then just kept going, it was like you were flowing like a rapper or something there, James. I thought it was phenomenal. But the thing that popped in me was, what do you want? I'm asking myself that every day, every month, especially in this season. There's so many new capabilities. I've had so many turning points recently, and I'm on a journey for sure. But the question is, we all have to ask, what do you want? Are you getting up just to clock in and get a paycheck? Or do you actually enjoy this career? What, I'm not asking that to you, but I'm asking that to all of us. What's actually getting you up in the morning? What is that motivation? You've been talking about motivation being so important. What do you want? Well, if you really want something, I think you're going to be curious about it. You're going to want to know about it. The most meaningful relationships we have in life, there is never a shortage of questions. Even with my wife, we've been married almost 14 years now, and still, there's so much more for me to learn about her, vice versa. Uh, but know what you know what you don't know who to go to sum it up, right? And if you don't know something, it's okay. The
Yeah,
best thing for you to do for yourself or anybody else, especially the organizations you work with, is acknowledge it. And then go figure out where to find it. Because if
yeah,
you're applying just an ounce of curiosity, I guarantee there's an answer out there
sure.
pretty quick. And I've noticed this, but I will give a call out to Adam Jason. He's a goat, guys, a local seller. And if you know him, you know that he comes with meaningful solutions. He comes with meaningful curiosity, and he comes prepared. But he would encourage our team in Raleigh when I worked at SHI. Hey, come with level 3 to 5 questions, and that's what popped in my head. Come with 3 to 5 level questions, meaning you tried something first, and that's the point you're making, right? Come with an idea. If it's
Yeah,
if you did the wrong, that's okay. We can deal with that. But like, don't do nothing. Don't just sit by. Be motivated again to wanna
yeah.
see something.
Well, and that applies to so many things. My wife is finishing her doctoral program and she's applying for jobs. And she was going through this and she's like, I'm trying to prepare for this interview, Jamie. And I'm like, questions, come up with questions. Well, I already worked at this clinic, so I already know a lot of the answers. I'm like, nope, you need to ask thoughtful questions to get their opinion about something. And this is important in sales. This is important in marketing. This is important in product, and this is important in engineering. You asking good questions. But if you want to try to get a good job, the number one thing I would recommend that applies to everybody is to come to that interview with thoughtful questions. Hey, I noticed that in your quarterly report, you said this, or I saw a news article about your company, that said this. How do you see that affecting this job or your department? Or, what is that, does this position, see any result from that? Whoa, that's a really insightful question. This is a person who's thinking about the role, the job, and I've interviewed hundreds of people. And when they come with good questions, first of all, they get me talking about me and my company, what I love to talk about most, right? And everybody likes to talk about themselves and their own company the most, so it gets you talking. And I walk away from those interviews saying, wow, that was a great interview. um, but when I reflect on it, it's a great interview because they came and asked good questions and they're interviewing me as much as I'm interviewing them. And that's the kind of person I want to work with, someone who's going to be thoughtful and diligent and sure that it's the right fit for them as well as it is for me.
In order for that to happen, though, you've kind of got to have a humble self-confidence and an awareness as an individual and as that professional. And the reason I say that is because I've got a very unique use case for this, right here in this conversation of really you can't fear asking the question. Well, I started the conversation, right? We met this week actually, and so this was serendipitous, and I'm glad it was. But here's the thing: I introduced you, and I think I said Jamie, and then midway I was like, no, his email says James. I want to ask him, but wait a minute, I don't want this to be awkward because I should know.
Right.
But I'm curious because I've heard you now say Jamie, and I've said James, and you haven't corrected me, and I'm like, which
Well, I'll
one?
answer to both. I grew up as Jamie as a kid, and when I got to high school, I decided I was going to be grown up and go by James. And so I started going by James, but half the teachers knew me, so they called me Jamie, and the other half didn't, so they called me James. And so I got sort of a mix in high school, but I stuck with it in college. And I was James to all my friends in college. And then I go take my first job, and I'm in a department of 16 people, and there are five Jameses. And I walk right back down to that badge office and say, I'm Jamie. And so, it just was too confusing to have five Jameses in the same department. And so I just went by Jamie. And, actually, I've actually I love it. I go back to that. So, yeah. But funny story, I had an au pair who lived with us for a year. And on the day before she left, she told us that we'd been pronouncing her name wrong the entire time. And I was just like, "Ah," I couldn't believe it. I was so frustrated that she didn't tell me that we were saying it wrong. And so, now, working in business, especially in international business, I see all kinds of names and I have no idea how to say them when I look at them. And so like the first thing I ask is, look, hey, I really want to make sure that I say your name right. Josh, can you tell me how to pronounce your last name, please? Um, and again, it's the point you made earlier is it's me trying to see you and recognize you and connect with you
Hmm.
and be true to you.
Yeah. I mean, we have to be authentic. And I'll say every time I've showed up to a boardroom, to a conversation, to a meeting, and I've been less than authentic, guess what? I've got less than great results. So, if I'm looking at the pendulum, is this helpful or not? Stop being inauthentic. Just show up. What we just did right there was we had a bit of curiosity, and guess what we all know more about? Jamie. We know more about his story. And that's what we need to do. Why? Because bond is being formed, even in this one conversation. Trust is being built. I see Jamie. Jamie sees me, right? And I think we're both motivated towards bringing some value to the marketplace. I hope that was perceived value to everyone today. Jamie, I want to thank you for sharing your insights. I think it's clear that self-directed learning, the principles we've talked about today, are crucial for fostering innovation and success. I think in product development, and this is transferable to all of the other areas in the marketplace. But any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience, Jamie? I want to offer you that stage to say that.
No, I mean, I think that's it. When you're feeling like you don't know how to do something and you don't know where to start, just go. And do the fastest thing you can do to start something. Um, you know, even one of the best software developers I've ever worked with, he would write up some code and know that he's going to throw it away, but he would write up the first version of it and get it all working in a weekend and just throw it all together and be like, okay, that was crap. Now I know what the problem is, and now I'm going to go do it. So don't be afraid that you're going to waste time. Don't be afraid that you're going to waste work. You spend more time wasting time worrying about wasting time than you do wasting, redoing something because you learned. And so be fearless, go do it, learn, have fun, ask questions.
Well, you heard it, folks. Thanks for taking the time to listen. Again, I will post this on LinkedIn and give a link to Vimeo in case you want to listen to an hour-long conversation. But if you're anything like me, you don't have time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. So I heard you LinkedIn, and I'm doing shorts. So what you can expect is over the next, and you probably won't even listen to this part, but I will write it in my post. And yeah, if anybody does reach out, okay, I will say this: if anybody reaches out and says, "Hey, I watched the whole video," I'll take you out for a drink of your choice, whether it be coffee, tea, you name it. If there's adult flavors, we can talk and have just as much fun with that too. So take me up on that. But I'll post some shorts over the course of this next week until we get to week 3. So look forward to that. Jamie, thanks again. Yeah, hope everyone has a great day. And until next time, have a good one. Bye now.